2023 was supposed to be a great year for movies. Now that people were no longer reluctant to return to theaters due to COVID-19, the year was expected to be peppered with blockbusters that would make this one of the highest-grossing years in memory. After all, there were Marvel movies, DC movies, new stars, and a pipeline of films that didn't seem like it would dry up anytime soon. Of course, things ended up a little differently, with Hollywood brought to a standstill by strikes. At the same time, once powerful franchises started to wane when pitted against an increasingly weary public hungry for something new. Indeed, you had movies like Sound of Freedom outgrossing Indiana Jones. It was a pretty dramatic year overall, so here at JoBlo Originals, we're counting down some of the biggest pop culture stories of the year. Number 10. The year started off with a bang when James Gunn took over the DCU. Now, DC's never matched up to Marvel in terms of box office success, with many chalking this up to the fact there was no creative visionary like Kevin Feige at the helm. WB tried to remedy the situation by hiring James Gunn to head up the new DCU, with him announcing an ambitious slate of movies that seemingly ends the run of all current DC stars. This was a controversial decision, as Gal Gadot was still seen as pretty viable at the box office as far as Wonder Woman went, while Jason Momoa was prepping Aquaman 2 while this was going on. Were they finished in their roles? All signs point towards yes. But again, the DCU had been under a lot of strain, with movies like Batgirl being shelved in 2022, while Blue Beetle and The Flash were terrible box office flops. So perhaps James Gunn is the way forward for the DCU, but he's going to have to deal with something that nobody could have foreseen earlier this year, superhero fatigue. But we'll get to that a little later. Number 9. Scream 7's cast upheaval. One of the first big hits of 2023 was Scream 6, a film that proved that the new cast of characters headed by Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega were popular enough with fans to bring in big numbers at the box office. Scream 7, with a new director Christopher Landon at the helm, was expected to go right into production, but star Melissa Barrera was fired due to social media posts she made that were critical of Israel that were deemed anti-Semitic. Around this time, Jenna Ortega, who has become a pretty big star over the last year due to the success of her Netflix show Wednesday, also passed on the film, which has been left in a state of limbo. Apparently now, the film is being retooled to perhaps focus on the legacy cast, which may include the return of Neve Campbell, who's been haggling for more money that the studio seems reluctant to pay her, despite the fact that many fans think she's more than earned a raise, and even Patrick Dempsey, who was her love interest in Scream 3. Number 8 was a very tragic tale, the sad death of Matthew Perry. Friends fans were shocked when he died suddenly, at a pretty young age too. Matthew Perry had fought drug addiction for years, but seemed to be on a healthy path forward. His death was one of several shocking ones this year, including Lance Reddick, Andre Braugher, Alan Arkin, Tina Turner, Angus Cloud, Michael Gambon, Tony Bennett, and too many more. Number 7, Taylor Swift ruled the world. Yes, during the strike, almost every movie put out by a major studio failed to some extent at the box office following the breakout success of Barbie and Oppenheimer. One exception was Taylor Swift's Eras Tours movie, which grossed hundreds of millions, while the tour itself was the concert ticket of the year everyone wanted but nobody could get. Plus, she had hit records, Grammy wins, and a relationship with Travis Kelce went ultra-viral, climaxing with her being named Time's Person of the Year. Indeed, Taylor Swift was virtually inescapable this year, and I can't remember a time where one figure owned the pop culture the way that she does, which is pretty amazing. Number 6, big stars show their mortality. Two beloved actors, Jeremy Renner and Jamie Foxx, both had notable brushes with death this year, with Renner being run over by a snowplow while Foxx suffered a mystery illness that apparently had him on the brink of death. Both men have started to re-emerge despite being left with permanent reminders of their brushes with death, although the way fans rallied around them and their determination to allow the public to see them as the mortals they are was inspiring. Number 5, Disney's very, very bad year. 2023 was Disney's centennial and was supposed to be a great year for the company. After all, they had huge franchise movies coming out, MCU films, and even an Indiana Jones movie. With only a few exceptions, all of their movies underperformed, while a few of them, including Wish, the very pricey Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and, unthinkably, the MCU's The Marvels, were all pretty much flops. What happened? Many pointed the finger at the company for spending too much energy on messaging rather than entertainment, with behind-the-scenes stories from Marvel depicting a company that seemingly had lost its way. I mean, when you're planning a Blade movie that wasn't going to focus on Blade, but instead on a couple of female characters, with the premise being to get a kind of positive message out there, I think you've kind of lost the plot somewhat. I mean, we go to see Blade for Blade killing vampires, right? It didn't help that some of the messaging revolving around these movies was perhaps overly politicized, with many slamming West Side Story star Rachel Zegler for her comments about her upcoming Snow White remake that seemed to throw the legacy of the Disney classic it's based on under the bus because it was deemed no longer politically correct. This is the type of thinking that many feel has made the company's films too concerned with identity politics rather than pure entertainment. Number 4, the rise and fall of Jonathan Majors. No movie star has ever had as swift a rise and as dramatic a fall as Majors. At the beginning of the year, he seemed destined for superstar status, with him kicking off a run as Kang in the MCU, co-starring in Creed 3, and getting Oscar buzz for his Sundance film Magazine Dreams. By the end of the year, he'd be found guilty of assault and harassment, and while waiting for sentencing, he was fired by Marvel, with him essentially unemployable for the foreseeable future. Even his formerly close colleague, Michael B. Jordan, who touted the pair as the next De Niro and Pacino earlier this year, has seemingly kept his distance. Number 3, superhero fatigue. With the notable exception of James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, superhero movies all at least underperformed this year and at worst tanked. It started when Ant-Man and the Wasp notably underperformed at the box office this year, with many claiming it was the moment that MCU fans kind of lost faith in what the company was doing. It got worse when the highly anticipated DC movie Shazam! Fury of the Gods really opened to anemic box office and was an all-out flop, much to the dismay of its stars Zachary Levi and Rachel Zegler, who went on and on and on in the media about how trolls were what really killed the franchise, even though the film was not very well received by anybody. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and the ultra-successful Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was a brief reprieve for the genre, but both of those were very good movies. By the time The Flash came out in July, oh boy, what a disaster was waiting for the genre, with the film an all-out flop. And later on in the year, The Marvels tanked. It was pretty amazing that a Marvel movie came out and didn't even manage to get to $100 million at the domestic box office, making many wonder if perhaps the superhero film has run its course. We shall see in 2024, that's for sure. Number 2, the strikes. Film production came to a standstill thanks to dual WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, which meant no movies or TV shows were filming for much of the year. While important gains were made for both guilds, the strike had a devastating effect on the livelihoods of some union members, with many saying the studios were absolutely cold-blooded in their refusal to negotiate. The immediate fallout of the strike will likely be more apparent in 2024, with it set to be a light year for movies, as films are still being delayed thanks to filming shutdowns, with things only now just going back into production. But let's end things on a high note. Number 1 biggest story of the year in terms of entertainment is Barbenheimer. Earlier this year, everyone assumed that Greta Gerwig's Barbie and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer were in a deadly collision course at the box office as they had the same release date. Rather than cancel each other out, the Barbenheimer phenomenon, sparked by the fact that both were actually good movies, drove each film to become gargantuan blockbusters, 2 of the biggest hits of the year, with many movie fans opting to do a double feature and see both on the same day. This was a much-needed piece of good news, as the dual failure of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, both of which were unseated by the Christian movie Sound of Freedom at the box office, made Hollywood think the whole summer would be a complete write-off. And you know what? It almost was. But I'll tell you, Christmas season sure could use another Barbenheimer. One's not coming though. So how is 2024 going to look? There's a lot of big movies coming out, but it doesn't seem like anything's on the horizon that really has the potential to break out the way that a Barbenheimer did. But hey, who knows? Is this going to be the year that people decide to start going to see movies that aren't just tentpole films? We'll have to wait and see.